"You're not my real father," she screamed, kicking the old soldier out. She saw a poor, embarrassing veteran. She had no idea the man she just disowned secretly controlled a $5 million fortune earned from his service. The words, sharp as shrapnel, tore through the opulent air of the Beverly Hills living room. "Get out of here, now. You're not my real father. You were just a favor my parents did out of pity." 65-year-old retired Sergeant Major Marcus Thorne stood at the door, a small suitcase in his hand, his posture as unyielding as the oak tree outside the panoramic window. He watched Jessica, the woman he'd raised as his own, her face twisted in a petulant rage that didn't belong on a 28-year-old lawyer. Her perfectly brushed blonde hair, a stark contrast to his own dark skin, swayed with the fury of her words. Standing beside her, observing the scene with the smug detachment of a spectator at a Roman circus, was her fiancé, Bradley Montenegro. The 35-year-old heir to a construction empire, draped in a cashmere sweater, drummed his manicured nails on the arm of an Italian leather armchair. "Finally, darling. It's about time," he murmured, his voice a silken venom. "You deserve a life free of baggage." Baggage. Was that what he was now? Marcus's mind flashed back, not to the years of working 3 jobs to pay for her college, or the nights he slept on the couch so she could have the bigger bedroom. It flashed back further, to the dust and sun of a rooftop in Fallujah. To the scent of cordite and fear. To his best friend, Sergeant David Miller, Jessica's biological father, pushing him out of a sniper's path, taking the bullet meant for him. As David bled out in his arms, his last, gasped words were not of fear, but a plea. "My daughter. Jessica. Promise me, Marcus. Promise me you'll look after her." He had promised. And he had kept that promise for 23 years, ever since he, a 42-year-old sergeant major, had flown back to the States and found a scared, orphaned 5-year-old girl who no wealthy relative wanted. He had raised her, loved her, given her a life her father would have been proud of. "Your father, David, entrusted you to me," Marcus said, his voice shockingly calm. The discipline of a lifetime in the army held his own rage in a vice of iron control. "I raised you as my own daughter." "Exactly. You raised me. You did your job as a glorified babysitter, a duty." Jessica retorted, parroting a line Marcus was certain Bradley had fed her. "And now, your duty is done. You can leave. My life, my real life, is just beginning." She gestured around the magnificent room, at the art on the walls, the view of the city lights. "I'm a successful lawyer. I have this beautiful house, a rich fiancé. I don't need you, a retired old soldier, complicating things and embarrassing me in front of my friends." The word hung in the air, embarrassing. That was the heart of it. In the 2 years since Bradley had entered their lives, Marcus had gone from "my father" to "Marcus, who helped me when I was a child." He'd seen the conversations that stopped when he entered a room, the condescending glances from Bradley's country club friends who wondered why this distinguished lawyer lived with an old black man who spoke of duty and honor instead of stocks and dividends. "What my friends think, Marcus," she continued, her cheeks flushed, "is that it's weird. A respected lawyer living with, she couldn't finish the sentence. Bradley, however, had no such qualms. "With someone who clearly isn't part of our social circle," he added, adjusting a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist that cost more than Marcus's entire military pension. "Nothing personal. It's just about appearances." Marcus looked at the shelf where photos of Jessica as a child once stood. Photos of him teaching her to ride a bike, of her high school graduation. They were all gone, replaced by tennis trophies and equestrian ribbons. He looked at the daughter he had shielded, nurtured, and loved. The little girl who cried herself to sleep after her parents' accident, who would only calm down when he sang old army marching cadences softly by her bedside. She was gone, too. In her place was this stranger, her eyes as cold and hard as the marble beneath his feet. "It's okay, Jessica," he said simply, adjusting the strap of his suitcase. A strange serenity settled over him, the calm of a soldier who knows the battle is lost, but the war is far from over. A secret, held for years, pulsed within him. She had no idea what she was throwing away. "I'm glad you're being reasonable," Bradley laughed. "It makes it easier for everyone." Marcus walked toward the door. As he stepped across the threshold, he didn't look back. He was a soldier. He knew when to retreat. And he knew, with chilling certainty, when to plan his counterattack. The polished oak door clicked shut behind him, a sound of finality that echoed the closing of a 23-year chapter of his life. Marcus walked down the stone pathway of the garden he had planted with his own hands, the scent of jasmine a bitter reminder of happier times. He got into his old, reliable pickup truck, a vehicle that had drawn countless sneers from Bradley. As he drove away from the multi-million-dollar house he had helped pay for, his phone buzzed. It was Jessica. "Marcus," her voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. "I forgot to mention, I need you to clear your things from the garage by tomorrow. Bradley is converting the space into a private gym." The garage he had built on weekends, brick by brick. "And another thing. Please don't show up at my office anymore. A few partners have made uncomfortable comments." He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "I understand." "Great. Oh, and Marcus." A dramatic pause. "It would be best if you didn't mention to anyone that you raised me. It could cause misunderstandings about my family background." The call ended. No goodbye. Just a dial tone. He drove for an hour, the glittering lights of Beverly Hills fading in his rearview mirror, until he reached a part of town they never visited. He parked in front of a small, unassuming bar called The Garrison, a quiet haven for veterans run by a retired Marine. The air inside smelled of sawdust and old loyalty. In a corner booth, a familiar face looked up. Robert, a fellow sergeant from his old unit, now ran a successful private security firm. "Marcus. Man, where have you been?" Robert greeted him with a firm handshake and a worried look. "You look like you've seen combat." Over a glass of bourbon, Marcus recounted the events of the evening. Robert listened, his face growing darker with every word. When Marcus finished, Robert slammed his fist on the table. "After everything you did? I remember you selling your own meals on base to buy her a birthday present. That kid David, he would be turning in his grave." "She doesn't remember that life, Rob," Marcus said, his voice weary. "Or she pretends not to. This isn't just about being embarrassed, man," Robert said, leaning forward. "It's about money. This Bradley character, he sees you, a retired NCO, and assumes you're broke. He wants her to cut you off so there's no question about who inherits whatever she thinks she's getting." Marcus allowed a small, grim smile to touch his lips. "The funny thing is, they think they know everything about me." He took out his phone, an old, functional model, and opened a banking app. He slid it across the table to Robert. Robert squinted at the screen, then his eyes widened in disbelief. He looked up at Marcus, then back at the screen. The number displayed in the investment portfolio was staggering. $5.5 million, he whispered, choking on the words. "Marcus, is this real?" Marcus nodded calmly. "Remember that little side project I was working on in the service? The reinforced composite plating for vehicle armor? The one the guys all laughed at?" Robert's memory clicked. "The one you said would stop an IED blast?" "Yeah. Well, the Army eventually patented it. And a major defense contractor licensed it for all their new vehicles. They've been paying me royalties for the past 15 years. He took his phone back, the screen glowing in the dim light of the bar. "I never told Jessica. I put it all into a blind trust, let it grow. I wanted her to value me for who I am, not what I have." He took a long sip of his bourbon. "Looks like I got my answer tonight." Robert was speechless for a long moment. Then, a slow grin spread across his face. "So, Sergeant Major. What's the mission?" For the first time that day, a genuine light flickered in Marcus's eyes. The weariness was gone, replaced by the steely glint of a strategist. "First, we give them exactly what they want. I disappear. Completely. No calls, no fuss." He stood up, placing a few bills on the table. "Then, we re-engage. On a battlefield of my choosing." The next morning, Marcus was a different man. The stoic, wounded father was gone, replaced by the meticulous, strategic Sergeant Major. He and Robert set up a temporary command center in Robert's modest office, a world away from the gleaming towers of LA law firms. A whiteboard was soon covered in notes, timelines, and names. "The objective is not to destroy her, Rob," Marcus stated, his voice firm as he circled a name on the board. "The objective is to educate her. A lesson in honor, sacrifice, and respect. A lesson she never learned at Yale." "So, what's the first step in this educational exercise?" Robert asked, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "We establish a new identity," Marcus said. "Not for me, but for my money. I want you to call Harrison and Associates, the most exclusive financial consulting firm in the city. Tell them you represent a new, anonymous philanthropist interested in making a significant donation to a military-themed charity." Robert whistled. "Harrison. Those guys won't even take a call unless you've got an 8-figure portfolio." "My portfolio is now approaching 8 figures, Marcus said calmly. "Tell them the client's name is the Miller Thorne Foundation, named after a fallen hero and his brother-in-arms. Tell them the initial endowment is $2 million, with more to come." The call was made. As Robert predicted, the initial reception was icy. But the moment the numbers were mentioned, the tone shifted from dismissal to deference. An appointment was scheduled for the following day. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Marcus, through his newly formed foundation, would become the primary sponsor for the city's most prestigious social event of the season, the annual Military Heroes Gala. It was a high-profile fundraiser for the families of fallen soldiers and wounded veterans, an event attended by the city's elite, politicians, CEOs, and socialites. It was exactly the kind of event Jessica and Bradley would be desperate to attend. "They'll be there," Robert confirmed a few days later, tapping his laptop. Bradley's father's company buys a table every year for the networking. Henderson and Associates, Jessica's firm, is a corporate sponsor. They're both on the VIP list. "Perfect," Marcus said, a blueprint forming in his mind. He spent the next week working with a quiet intensity. He wasn't just donating money, he was orchestrating an event. He worked with the gala's organizers, a committee headed by a retired 4-star general who knew Marcus by reputation. He had specific requests for the lighting, the speaker's agenda, and the seating chart. He made sure the program included a tribute to fallen heroes, with a special mention of Sergeant David Miller. He remained completely anonymous to the public, the mysterious benefactor known only as the Miller Thorne Foundation. To Jessica and Bradley, Marcus Thorne had simply vanished, a ghost from a past they were eager to erase. They had no idea he was a ghost who was about to haunt their future in the most public and spectacular way imaginable. They were busy climbing the social ladder, completely oblivious to the fact that the man they had cast aside was now building the very stage upon which their public downfall would be executed. The pieces were in place. The trap was set. All Marcus had to do was wait for them to walk into it. The night of the Military Heroes Gala arrived, blanketing Beverly Hills in a sea of glittering lights and feigned patriotism. A parade of luxury cars disgorged the city's elite onto a red carpet, where they posed for cameras before sweeping into the grand ballroom of the country club. Jessica and Bradley made their entrance with the practiced ease of people who believed they belonged. She was a vision in an $8,000 designer gown, a string of pearls gracing her neck. He was impeccable in an Italian tuxedo, his smile a carefully calibrated mix of charm and condescension. Finally, an event worthy of us, Jessica murmured to Bradley, squeezing his arm as they navigated the crowded room. No, awkward elements to ruin the evening. Bradley laughed, a sound that didn't reach his cold eyes. This is our world, darling. Full of people who matter. His gaze swept over a group of decorated soldiers in their dress uniforms, a flicker of disdain in his eyes. It's a bit much, all this military fanfare, don't you think? Still, good for business. My father says a photo with a general is worth $1 million in PR. They mingled, exchanging air kisses and business cards, their conversation a symphony of status and ambition. Jessica felt a surge of validation. This was where she belonged. This glittering, powerful world was her birthright, a right she had secured by cutting away the dead weight of her past. She found her colleague, Sarah, by the champagne fountain. So, Jessica began, any idea who the mystery benefactor is? The one funding this whole thing? Sarah shrugged, taking a sip of her drink. No one knows for sure. The rumor is it's some incredibly wealthy but reclusive patriot. The foundation is called the Miller-Thorne Foundation. I heard the name Marcus mentioned, but it's probably just a coincidence. Jessica's perfectly sculpted eyebrow rose. Marcus? Don't be ridiculous, she scoffed, a dismissive laugh escaping her lips. The only Marcus I know is probably trying to figure out how to pay his rent. Trust me, it's not him. She turned away, scanning the room for a more important conversation, the name already forgotten. The dramatic irony was a palpable force in the room. The audience, through the lens of the story, was in on the secret, watching as Jessica and Bradley blissfully danced on the edge of a cliff they couldn't see. Every arrogant comment, every condescending glance at a uniformed soldier, was another shovel of dirt on their own social graves. They saw the soldiers as props, the gala as a stage for their own advancement, and the anonymous donor as a potential contact to be exploited. They were so blinded by their own ambition that they failed to notice the undercurrent of genuine respect that filled the room. They failed to see the quiet dignity of the Gold Star families, the quiet pride of the decorated veterans. They were tourists in a land of honor, fluent only in the language of greed. And as the lights began to dim for the evening's main presentation, they took their seats at their VIP table, blissfully unaware that they were about to become the star attractions in a morality play they never knew they were cast in. The mystery was about to be solved, and their world was about to come crashing down. The ballroom fell into a hushed silence as the host, General Peterson, a decorated 4-star general with a commanding presence, stepped up to the podium. A warm, respectful applause filled the room. Good evening, the general began, his voice resonating with authority. Tonight, we are here to honor heroes. But we are also here because of a hero. A man who wishes to remain in the shadows, but whose generosity has made this night, and the future of countless military families, possible. Jessica and Bradley clapped politely, their eyes scanning the room for potential business contacts. The Miller-Thorne Foundation was established this year with a single, profound mission, the general continued. To honor the sacrifice of those who fell, and to lift up the families they left behind. It is named for two men who served together, brothers in arms. One of whom, Sergeant David Miller, made the ultimate sacrifice in Iraq. At the mention of her father's name, a flicker of annoyance crossed Jessica's face. It was ancient history, a story that had no place in her new, glamorous life. His brother-in-arms not only survived that day, the general's voice grew with emotion, but he came home and dedicated his life to raising Sergeant Miller's orphan daughter. Beyond that, he used his brilliant mind, a mind honed on the battlefield, to invent a piece of tactical equipment that has saved thousands of soldiers' lives since. An invention that has, in turn, blessed him with considerable financial success. A murmur went through the crowd. This was a story no one had heard. Bradley leaned toward Jessica, whispering, "Now this is interesting. Wonder who this guy is." The general paused, letting the anticipation build to a fever pitch. He scanned the room, his eyes finally landing on their table. Tonight, That man has decided to step out of the shadows. He is here to prove that the greatest measure of a man is not the rank on his shoulder, but the honor in his heart. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a true American hero, the founder of the Miller Thorne Foundation, retired Sergeant Major Marcus Thorne. The spotlight swung, cutting through the darkness, and landed directly on Marcus as he rose from a humble table at the back of the room. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his silver-gray hair catching the light. He looked powerful, serene, and utterly in command. The name, the face, the story, it all collided in Jessica's mind like a multi-car pileup. A strangled gasp escaped her lips. The color drained from her face, leaving a sickly, pale mask of horror. Beside her, Bradley's jaw hung open, his face a comical picture of disbelief and dawning, gut-wrenching realization. The room erupted in applause, but Jessica couldn't hear it. The only sound was the frantic pounding of her own heart. Marcus walked calmly to the stage, shook the general's hand, and turned to the audience. He looked directly at Jessica, his gaze not angry, but filled with a deep, profound sorrow. "Thank you, General," he said, his voice calm and clear, amplified throughout the silent ballroom. "A few weeks ago, I was painfully reminded that not everyone in this country understands the meaning of words like sacrifice or honor. He let the words hang in the air. I was told I was an embarrassment. That I didn't belong. I was kicked out of my own home by the very person I dedicated my life to protecting." The cameras, sensing a scandal, all swiveled to focus on Jessica's horrified face. The flashes were like explosions. "But that experience," Marcus continued, "did not make me bitter. It made me determined. Determined to build something that would honor the man whose sacrifice gave me a second chance at life, and a daughter to love. The David Miller Memorial Scholarship, the centerpiece of this foundation, will ensure that his legacy, and the legacy of all our fallen heroes, is one of hope and opportunity." He never raised his voice. He never mentioned her name. He didn't have to. Every word was a perfectly aimed shot, dismantling her world, her reputation, and her future, right before the eyes of the very society she was so desperate to impress. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. As the crowd rose to give Marcus a thunderous standing ovation, Bradley, ever the pragmatist, saw his future crumbling. He shot Jessica a look of pure venom, muttered, "You've ruined me," and stalked out of the ballroom, leaving her alone to face the flashing cameras and judgmental whispers. The scandal was the talk of Beverly Hills for weeks. By Monday morning, Jessica was called into the managing partner's office at her law firm and summarily fired. The public humiliation was a liability they wouldn't tolerate. Her life, once a carefully constructed monument to success, lay in ruins. She lost her job, her fiancé, and her standing in a society that had no tolerance for such spectacular failure. 3 months later, Jessica was living in a small, run-down apartment, her savings gone, her calls to former friends unanswered. She was at rock bottom when an envelope arrived. It bore no return address, but she recognized the crisp, official stationery. It was from the Miller Thorne Foundation. Inside was not a check, but a job application for a low-level, unpaid volunteer position. The role, assisting military families with their scholarship and aid paperwork. At the bottom was a handwritten note from Marcus: "Purpose is not found in what you get, but in what you give." It was a lifeline, but one without a safety net. Swallowing her pride, she accepted. The story's final scene takes place a year later. Jessica, dressed in simple, practical clothes, sits in a community center office. The arrogance is gone from her eyes, replaced by a quiet empathy. She is patiently helping a young, tearful war widow navigate a complex application form for her children's education. She listens to the woman's story, offers a comforting hand, and for the first time, feels a sense of purpose that no corporate win ever gave her. From the doorway, Marcus watches, his expression a complex mix of pride and lingering sorrow. He hasn't forgotten the betrayal, but he sees the first, fragile shoots of redemption. He had lost the daughter he raised, but in her place, he had helped forge a woman her real father would have been proud of. He had learned that the best revenge isn't destruction, but reconstruction. He had turned his pain into a purpose that was now healing not only strangers, but the very person who had hurt him most. A quiet voiceover closes the story. Sometimes, a person must lose everything they thought they wanted to find what they truly need. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes, it's about the difficult, painful path to redemption. Do you believe Jessica deserved a second chance? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this story of resilience and true justice inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that challenge and move us.